The Shepnaz podcast begins now.
You're listening to the Shepnaz podcast, a podcast by Shepherd Church. Everything we do here is to connect our community in a meaningful relationship with Christ, and we are expecting great things. My name's Joey. I'll be your host today. We're on the other side of the 21 days of prayer and fasting, and we've been diving into our current sermon series called Money Matters. Rob Paul is back in the studio with us to help us to see what the Bible says about stewardship and generosity and what God's calling us to. And it all starts right now. Happy Thursday. Unless you're listening to this on any other day of the week, then happy whatever day that is.
Happy day.
Yeah, happy day.
Oh, happy day.
Oh, happy day. I was waiting for you to sing it. Okay. Hey, Rob's here, guys.
I want people to come back and listen, so we won't do that.
Well, hey, Rob's here, and we're going to do something a little bit different today. Yesterday on the podcast, if you listened, you should check it out. We kind of looked at one of the recent sermons that we talked about with Money Matters, biblical stewardship, what it is, kind of the purpose of it, discovering that Jesus really talked more about money than anything in his ministry, and the Bible actually speaks about money over 2,000 times. We've got some resources for if you want to look into that, but. Today we want to look at another parable that Jesus taught about money, and one that might be a little confusing when we read it. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to read it because this is kind of like an audiobook, and then we're gonna talk about it.
Break it down.
Yeah, and then we're gonna break it down. Rob's gonna break it down. All right. So this comes from Luke chapter 16, starting verse 1. This is what it says. Jesus told his disciples, there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So he called him in and he asked him, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because you cannot be manager any longer. The manager said to himself, what shall I do now? My manager's taking away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I'll do. When I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their house. So he called in each one of his master's debtors, and he asked first, how much do you owe my master? 900 gallons of olive oil, he replied. The manager told him, take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 450. Then he asked the second, how much money do you owe? 1,000 bushels of wheat, he replied. He told him, take your bill, make it 800. The master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light. And I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it's gone, you'll be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. Whoever can be dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? And if you've not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. The Pharisees, who loved money, heard all of this, and they were sneering at Jesus. He said to them, you are the ones who justify yourselves in the eyes of others, but God knows your hearts. What people value highly is detestable in God's sight. Okay, Rob, lay it out, man.
Yeah. So it's an interesting story. And so it starts off with a wealthy guy who owns probably something like a vineyard. But in the story, it's clear that he doesn't live there, right? So he owns property. He has someone living there managing it for him, which would be his servant. And the servant was dishonest. And so what he was doing as he was charging people for things and paying the bills, he was upcharging them. This was a common practice back then because the servant who would charge other people would make one of the ways they made money was by upcharging people and then skimming some off the top. And so this is what he was doing, right? And the manager, the guy who owns the property, finds out this guy is not managing my stuff well. Yeah. And so he calls him in and he says, look, I understand you're not managing my property well. You're being dishonest and you're going to lose your job. So this guy's like, that's bad news for me. I'm going to lose my job. Yeah. And he even says, like, I'm an older guy and I can't dig ditches. I can't do the hard labor. I got to figure something out. And so in his scheming to figure out how to take care of himself because he knows he's about to lose his job, he calls in all the people who owed his master money, the money or it was whatever he had charged him, right?
Right.
And one of the things that was common back then is that they wouldn't necessarily pay in money, but they would pay in products or whatever. So the one guy comes in, he says, how much do you owe my master? And I think he said it was 800 gallons, 900 gallons of olive oil. And so he comes in and he reduces it. He goes, listen, I'm not going to charge you the full 900. My master, he probably would, but I'm not going to. I'm going to cut it down to whatever it was, like 400. So what this guy's doing is he's making an ally, right? He's like, look, I know you really owe us 900, but I'm going to only charge you 400.
Right.
So he's doing two things. One, he's getting his master's bills paid. He's not making the skimming off the upcharge, but he's making some money back.
Yeah.
But he's making an ally. So like this guy's like, oh, you're my friend. I owed you 900, but you're only gonna make me 4.
Yeah.
Pay 4. So he's gaining some friends here, right? Then he does it again with another guy. Calls in the guy and he owed him some bushels of wheat, 1,000 bushels of wheat, and he says, well, take your bill and make it 800. You don't have to pay me the full amount. So he's doing the same thing here. He's like getting some money for his master, but he's also making some friends, right? And so in the process, he's looking out for himself all the way around because he has to come up with this plan because he knows he's going to lose his job. And what's interesting about this, I mean, Jesus says some really good things afterwards, but what's interesting is that Jesus commended this guy for his shrewdness. And if you're like a follower of Jesus, you're like, how is that commendable? You were upcharging people, and then you came in and you downsized it, and you're really doing it all so that you could make friends, and that when you don't have a job, you could go to these guys and say, remember what I did for you. I think there's probably a business word for that. I don't know what it is, but it can't be good.
It's called Coles.
Extortion or something. I don't know what it is.
They say this was the price. Oh, but this is all we're going to charge you.
Right.
But we still spend $200 there.
Yeah. So anyway, it's interesting to me that Jesus commended the guy, and I think we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about that.
Yeah. So stay on the edge of your seats. We're going to take a quick break. Pastor Rob wants to kind of dig into this. That it's more than what might meet the eye. So stick around. One of the resources we want to let you in on as we are going through our sermon series, Money Matters, is a book by Randy Alcorn called The Treasured Principle, Unlocking the Secret of Joyful Giving. In the book, you'll hear the radical teaching of Jesus all about generosity. You can grab a copy in the lobby on Sundays, or you can find it for yourself on Amazon. Hopefully, once you discover this secret, your life will never look the same. Each month, our church gathers for an intentional time of prayer. Ignite happens on the first Tuesday of every month. We begin with expectant worship and then move into a time of prayer led by Pastor Rob. February 7th is the next Ignite from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. Plus, we've got programming for your kids. We'll see you here at Shepherd on February 7th for Ignite. All right, Pastor Rob, we've all been waiting patiently. Let's dig in and kind of see what's really happening here. What can we really learn from this? It can't be as simple as be a bad person and then pretend to be a good person.
Right. The lesson is to be dishonest to get ahead.
Right.
No, that's not it, right?
Right.
And that's what it seems like. So Jesus commends the guy. And what Jesus commends the guy for is not his dishonesty, because he was being dishonest. He was charging people more than he should have. Then he adjusted the bill to make himself look better, to make friends and everything. Mm-hmm. That's not how you do business, right? But what Jesus was commending was that he took the opportunity to do something wise, right? So he was finding the good in a bad situation, which is really a good quality for us to develop. So he's facing this bad situation, and he's like, how can I do something good for my master? How can I do something good for myself? And it's that quality that Jesus was commending. And I think the guy knew, look, I can't go back and I can't undo what I did. I'm going to lose my job. I can't change the past. And that's true for all of us. None of us can go back and change the past. We can't change how we dealt with our finances we can't change anything that we did in the past, but we can choose what's next. And I used to travel around and do school assemblies, and we talked about sex and we talked about that a lot in the assemblies. But we're always talking about kids who have done things in the past that they regretted and they wish that they didn't do. And the truth is, you can't go back and undo any of that. Mm-hmm. But you can make different choices today to choose a different ending for yourself. And it's the same with us with our finances. We can't undo what we've done, but we can choose what's next. And that's what this guy was doing. So the first thing that Jesus admonished is that he was using his opportunities wisely, right? He stopped gouging people. He lowered the prices, which allowed him to get some money for his master, which allowed him to get some money for himself as well. He was making allies, and he was going to have some friends when he lost a job, that maybe he would have a place to stay or maybe a job or whatever. So there was that. And one of the spiritual implications of this, as I was studying, is that the way that we spend our money now can have eternal impact. Like he was spending his money in a certain way to provide an impact for him later. But the way that we spend our money now and invest our money now can have eternal impact. And we should be shrewd and wise in our giving, so that where we give and the way we give and where we give can have an eternal impact. And one of the things that I read as I was kind of trying to dive into this story was Warren Wiersbe is a guy who said it. He says, all of us should want to meet people in heaven who trusted Christ because we helped to pay the bill for the gospel witness around the world. So it's kind of like I think about, we just did Faith Promise at the church, where we're giving money to missions. Like the money that you give to Faith Promise, we send on to missionaries who are serving in other parts of the world, who are sharing the gospel with people that we'll never meet. But it could be that someday we'll be in heaven and meet somebody who's there because we helped pay the salary of a missionary who was there telling them about Jesus.
Yeah.
And so it's like we get a part in that, and it's a way for us to participate in those kind of things. And so it's using the opportunities that we have wisely to invest in a wise way. I think that that's really important. Another thing I think that was interesting is that Jesus was admonishing this guy to be faithful in the way that he used his material wealth. Like he said at the end of the story, Jesus says, if you're faithful with a few things and you prove yourself trustworthy, then I would entrust you with more things. Mm-hmm. And like if you entrust someone with something that not very much and they do a bad job with it, it would be foolish to entrust them with more, right? Yeah. So you don't want to do that. So Jesus is saying that if I entrust you with a few things, a small amount of things, and you do a good job with it, I'm going to entrust you with more things. And here's what's interesting. He's entrusting us with earthly wealth, but he wants to entrust us with earthly wealth that invests in eternity, that can make an eternal difference. And so being faithful with those little things, God will not commit his true riches to individuals or ministries that waste money, and will not give an honest accounting to the people who have supported them. And so it's important for us to be honest. I remember I was talking to my girls one time, and when we were talking about, they were little, we were teaching them to tithe, and so if you get $1 in your allowance and you give 10 cents to the Lord and you save some or whatever, and both of them have said to me and Monica recently that they're grateful that we taught them how to do that when they didn't have very much money. Mm-hmm. Because I think it was Aubrey who said it's a lot easier to give a dime when I get $1 than to give $100 when I get $1,000. But because she'd been giving that 10% when she was little, when she started getting a real paycheck that was not an allowance from her parents, but a real paycheck, it was much easier because that discipline had already been built in. Mm-hmm. She was faithful with the little things, and then God began to bless her with the bigger things as well. And I think that's important. The other thing I think is really important just to catch is that eternal wealth is far more valuable than worldly wealth. And so what we invest for the kingdom has eternal impact, and it's never going to go away. It's going to be there forever, and we're going to be able to enjoy that as well. And so then finally, the last thing that I think is interesting is that the Lord admonished us to be wholly devoted to God and single-minded. And that's where he says at the very end, he says, no one can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. And I think, what Jesus is just basically saying is that both can't be first. Yeah. Like if I'm going to be, your Savior, your Lord, and your Master who you serve, then serve me, and then I will tell you how to deal with your finances. Or you can let your finances be your God, and then I won't be first, and then you can just deal with the consequences of putting other things first. And so Jesus is really talking about the value of putting him first, and then when he's first, he orders everything else in our lives, rather than trying to put money first, ignoring what God says about it, and then expecting God's blessings in our life because we think we know better than him.
That's good.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, hey, That's a lot for a small podcast, but I'm thankful for it. I think it's one of those things that
He just gave me a really funny look when he said that too. So
when you read that, it makes more sense than when, because at first glance, if you don't dig into it and really understand why, it wouldn't make sense. So it's good.
Yeah.
Well, so what we've been doing the past couple of days, yesterday, was kind of opening up this Money Matters portion of the podcast. And in the next few episodes, we're going to be inviting some friends from Shepherd to come talk to us about how God has used generosity and stewardship in their life to kind of turn things around. And so we're going to hear some stories from people that are maybe be just like you that are listening, that have trusted God. And he has brought them from a place that they were to where he wants them to be. And so that's what we're going to be doing coming up. But today, that's going to take care of what we've got. So special thanks.
Let me just throw in, I'm really excited about this. You're going to love these next episodes as we have people from our church who have just taken God at his word. They've been faithful to do what God has asked them to do. And then you're going to hear how God has been faithful to them. And it's really, really, really cool stories.
Yeah. So hey, special thanks to Pastor Rob for hanging out with us, continuing to let us use his office until we find a better home for this podcast. Be sure to subscribe wherever you find your audio. Please leave us a nice 5-star review. And don't forget, we've got an email. You can share your thoughts, your questions, or anything you'd like with us at podcast@shepnaz.org. You can learn more about what God is doing at Shepherd through our app, various social media pages, and of course online at shepnaz.org. For Rob, I'm Joey. Have a nice day.
This podcast is a production of the Shepherd Church of the Nazarene, Gahanna, Ohio. Email to podcast@shepnaz.org and let us know what you think.